In all honesty, this movie kind of makes me wish that Disney bought Warner Brothers instead of 20th Century Fox. I am not gonna lie. This is one of those movies. My local theaters are finally opening up because I'm in Ontario, Canada, and our lockdown restrictions have lifted for movie theaters, and now they're starting to let people in. Still at a very low capacity and various seating arrangements and all that with blocking of seats, but we can finally see movies again. Yay! I'm gonna say I'm very disappointed with the lineup of movies that Cineplex has, especially depending on the location. Like, I'm in southern part of Ontario, Chatham, Kent, London, Windsor type area, and there's not as many theaters. I think there's maybe like 6 theaters between those areas. All the schedules look basically the same. It's always whatever the movie is most newest, or the movies that they think is going to be getting them the most money. They're not showing anything older or anything that was maybe even released throughout the beginning of the year or even last year. And I am shocked because I'm like, I was expecting to be able to walk into the theater and see a movie that I couldn't see because of the pandemic. And the fact that Cineplex is not even, they're just going back to normal of the same, whatever's new, that's what's playing. You missed out on a film, that's too bad, you know? I hate that. I absolutely hate that. And I'm so disappointed in them. There's so many movies I wanted to catch up on, like The Book of Saw, Cruella, I was very interested in seeing. The Sparks Brothers documentary directed by Edgar Wright. I really wanted to see that. I don't even think that's playing anywhere. Hell, even Godzilla vs. King Kong I wanted to see in theaters, but I never got the chance. In the Heights looked interesting. Wrath of Man, the new Guy Ritchie film, but I guess I'll just pick it up on Blu-ray. Even if they went all the way back to last year, I would have loved to see Tenet at one more time in theaters. And it just overall surprises me because I thought with this pandemic and everything that when Cineplex returned, they would actually even dedicate some theaters to like even older movies or classic movies. Because I know every now and then they're like, hey, here's Back to the Future or Lord of the Rings trilogy or something like. Yeah, every now and then they have those little film events and like the classic film festival where they showed like for 2 days of the month, they're like North by Northwest or Citizen Kane or Ben-Hur. And it's like, I was kind of hoping there would be more of that. Maybe they dedicate one screen to an older movie for 1 week or something like that, but have the tickets at the $5 price point and, you know, try to generate interest in some of the more older movies. And I was kind of hoping for any of that, but they're just not doing that. It's the same schedule. There's a couple theaters that have something different. Like, for example, the Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. That movie is playing in very little theater run right now. And you would have to actually literally go out of your way to try and track down a theater that is showing that film because the movie came out, I think, a month or 2 ago. I do praise the theaters, the Cineplexes that are showing the movies that are not being played in every other theater. Like, you know, I can guarantee a showtime for Fast and Furious 9 or Black Widow for the next, basically for the next month at least. I had to go out of my way to watch The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard because that was a movie that was released during the Ontario lockdown. And it was, I think, a month or 2 ago the movie was released. And the fact that I had to travel so far just to watch the film in theaters annoys me so much. The fact that they're not even offering it, because Cineplex has a private movie screening option where it's like, oh, you pay like 100 something Canadian dollars and you get to rent out the entire theater. to watch whatever movie you want. I assume it's whatever movie you want. I don't know if there's restrictions of, you can only choose from the newest movies or the movies we're playing in the theater. Because if that's the case, that sucks. If I'm going to spend that much money, I'm going to watch whatever the fuck I want for the for the movie experience, you know? But the worst part about that deal is that only certain theaters are doing it. And the closest theater that I think is doing it is in Mississauga and Oakville. And it's like, and Toronto. And it's like, I'm not going that far, spending like 50, 60 bucks on gas, plus another 120 just to sit down and watch a movie that I want to see, you know? So after sitting down for the first time in a long time to watch a movie, first thing I see is the trailers, and I gotta say, still sort of the same sort of trailers, you know, Top Gun, again, I guess I'll go see that when it comes out, stuff like that. But there was one trailer I kind of had to talk about, and it is a trailer for a movie that I've never even heard of this movie. I didn't even know this movie was being made. I don't know anything about this film, and it looks interesting as hell. I don't know if it's based off of a book. I don't know if it's based off of, or if it's just an original film. If it is, it felt like I was watching an original film's trailer. I don't know the history of this film, but I really want to see it after I saw that trailer, because I was like, it sold me. I was like not even halfway through the trailer, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I have to see it. And that is, I believe the name of the film is Remembrance. Or Reminisce. I think it's Reminisces with Hugh Jackman and Rebecca Ferguson. That movie, I'm kind of getting Prestige vibes with this. Even though it's like two different movies totally, but it looks very, very cool. And I'm absolutely going to be trying my best to run out to the theaters to watch this movie, definitely. So I don't know if anybody else has heard of this film. I saw the trailer and I'm like, I'm sold. So it has been 7 days. So 7 days ago, I watched for the very first time The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. And it is great as a sequel to the first one. Even though it went very over the top, very soap opera levels of either backstory or very much any sort of action soap opera is the best way I can describe this film. It is so much more over the top, and I kind of just love the film overall. Even though, you know, it's not as good as the first one, but it was so enjoyable, and I'm really glad that was my first movie back in theaters. I went into the movie not seeing any of the trailers, and so, but the problem is the poster. Unfortunately, as I went into the theater, I saw the poster, and the poster has revealed to me that Morgan Freeman and Antonio Banderas is in this film, and I'm like, wow, I kind of wish I didn't know that going in. Like, I distinctly remember with the first Hitman's Bodyguard, I actually, I didn't know Gary Oldman was in the film until I watched the film. I was like, is that Gary Oldman? It's so hard to tell, you know? No, I think the opening titles was spoiled it anyways, but it's a very entertaining film, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. But man, that movie, The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard, is very fast of a movie. It almost felt like whenever it's like an improvised sort of gag type moment in terms of either dialogue or just reactions, they play on it for a bit, but then as soon as it's like over, they just cut to the next scene very fastly. And it's not even fastly edited, it's just it cut out so much. Like it felt like this movie was almost like on a race to get to the ending. Like it just felt like it felt a little too fast and a little too short. That's what she said. Like, for example, there's a minor spoiler. There's a scene where somebody blows up a car, and I really thought there was going to be some sort of reaction out of the person who owns that vehicle. But it literally cuts away to another scene immediately. And it's like, given what just happened in the film, I'm pretty sure, you know, the person who owns the car would have had a sort of a big reaction or whatever, or some sort of reaction. But whatever. And there's also another part towards the end with the sort of final battle, there's a bit of cross-cutting that they really screwed up on when to cross-cut. And it's not out of order or whatever. The problem was in relation to a surprise of how, trying to describe the moment without actually spoiling it. There's a specific moment where the bad guy gets dealt with and it's sort of it reveals and the wound per se, and then it cuts away immediately to another scene, which it was cross-cutting between. And I felt, I was like, no, why did you choose to cut away now? Because this would have been the perfect time to have a little moment in regards to that. They should not have broken up that specific scene part. When watching it, you're like, it almost feels like they're speed running the movie per se. In some ways, like none of the joke, like whenever there's like a jokey moment or whatever, they do it for a little bit and then they move on, and like it doesn't, like none of the jokes last too long. There wasn't a moment where I'm like, oh, this is overplayed, or this, oh, we've seen this before, or like, can they just stop with trying to do this joke? It just, whenever a joke doesn't work, they just keep going. Like, not with the same joke, but like they move on to like the next part. Like, there's almost like no fat in this movie per se. There's like no, it just moves briskly, cool action, violent, and it works. But it was a very entertaining film. It's kind of like the equivalent of like going from Kingsman, the Secret Service, to Kingsman, the Golden Circle. I think how crazy and over top they went with this movie, it just worked. They made it work. I don't know how they made it work, but it just went more and more sort of over the top, more soap opera, shocking reveals, hidden tragic backstory. Like, it went the full mile, and it is less grounded, but I think it works. I don't know how they made it work, but this movie does work. Anyways, I can definitely see the Hitman wife's Bodyguard was definitely inspired by Kingsman in the terms of how they decide to shoot some of the major action scenes. Like, specifically, there's a bar scene where I believe that's when they first used that technique of, I think they film it bit by bit, the camera on the shoulder, and sort of piece it together in the edit, so to say. And it does work, but it kind of took me out of it a little bit, because I was like, oh, they're doing the Kingsman style thing. It's kind of unfortunate where it's like, oh, well, Kingsman did. I'm not saying no other movie can do that sort of style of fight scene, but it's just, it was kind of obvious they were doing it in that style. Like, it didn't really bring anything new to it, but they still made it work. It's just, it's not. It bothered me. I don't know if I think it was just me, but I still really enjoyed it. A good example of when they used the Kingsman style fighting cinematography was at the beginning of the final fight. There's a moment where the fight sort of starts off, and that for that little section, it worked really well. The Kingsman style fighting. But in the bar scene, I don't know. The first time watching it, I would have to go back and rewatch it. But the first time watching it, it felt, I don't know if it was jarring or I just felt it didn't work as well, the Kingsman style fighting. Because if I remember correctly, the first movie didn't have that sort of fighting. Or that sort of cinematography way of shooting a fight. I just thought it was kind of odd for the sequel they decided to try and mimic that sort of style, because they were like, hey, it looked pretty cool in Kingsman, maybe we can do it just as good, and I don't fault anybody for that. The movie is still great, the movie's still enjoyable, and can't wait to rewatch it, and pick it up. I'm definitely picking up on Blu-ray. I have no idea if they're gonna make a third movie. I kind of still want them to make a third movie just to see where the hell it goes. So after seeing the Hitman's wife's Bodyguard, The day after, I decided to watch another film, and I decided, oh, it's very late at night, and there's nobody has really bought tickets to go see this movie, so I'm like, I guess this would be a good opportunity to see the movie, and that is Space Jam: The New Legacy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Because I haven't seen any of the trailers. I did see, a couple of I think I saw the very first teaser trailer with him walking out with the New Jersey, and then, and the only part of the trailer I think I've seen of the newer trailers is there's a part where he's animated in the Looney Tunes town in the 2D style, and that's the all I basically seen of the movie, trailer wise and everything. And even then, because I didn't watch the whole trailer because it was one of those things where like Cineplex was doing the little ad before the movie, before a movie, where it's like, oh, here's a little behind the scenes footage of the movie or whatever, and they started off with showing the clips, and I just closed my eyes because I'm like, well, maybe I do want to see this movie. And I saw it. I don't know what to say. You know those times where movies just, you can't describe a movie per se, like you just or the experience of watching a movie, you're just like, I saw it. Okay. Wow. That was the type of movie. In all honesty, this movie kind of makes me wish that Disney bought Warner Brothers instead of 20th Century Fox. I am not gonna lie. This is one of those movies. Where to begin? Where do I begin? Space Jam: A New Legacy is technically, on a technical level, not a terrible film. And it's actually, I would rate it, it's not bad. And I don't know if I'm going to get flack for this. It was an okay film, and I felt it's not really hurting anyone. Yes, it's the kind of film that I'm like, there's several elements where I'm like, wish they did not do it this way, or I definitely wish they didn't choose this direction to go with this film. But it's an okay film. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not bad. It's not terrible. I love the original Space Jam. I love it, but compared to the other live action with 2D animation, this would be Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Looney Tunes Back in Action. Space Jam was always the sort of the weaker one of those bunch. Like, I still enjoyed the hell out of the movie. It's just I wasn't really a sports person growing up. I didn't really care that much for sports or watching sports. Like, if sports are on, it's like, hey, there's a team I kind of like, and it's like, hey, yeah, go team, like when the Olympics is on, and it's like you see your country, you're like, well, hey, I have a few minutes, I'll watch a couple of this, stuff like that. Like, I've never been like an avid sports fan where I'm like, oh, there's an upcoming game, I gotta see that, unless it's like, maybe like the finals of like, this is for the win, this is for the money, Other than that, I don't really watch sports. So that may have been the reason why I usually looked on Space Jam as the lesser of those type of movies. Like, I still love the film, but out of those like free, I would rather watch those two than Space Jam. But Space Jam: The New Legacy kind of, even though it's not a terrible film and it's not a bad film, I felt, as somebody who loves the original Space Jam, I felt they went totally in a wrong direction per se. Like, not the whole movie is a wrong direction. They had some good things. Like, for example, the very beginning setup with LeBron's family and having his son be like more interested in video games and all that. Like, I understand this is a kid's film, and that sort of beginning setup, I'm like, I like this. This is a nice little setup. When it starts to go wrong, oh, believe it or not, is when Warner Brothers shows up, The first major step against it was this AI algorithm, and it played by Don Cheadle. great casting. Really enjoyed sort of having him as a bad guy, but I wasn't expecting, here we go again, Warner Brothers making themselves the bad guy in a film, per se. But it's just the whole direction of, with the algorithm and having all the Warner Brothers sort of properties together in one sort of universe database. I don't know what the hell you call it. Having all that, and then introducing as well the sort of the video game aspects of it. It's like, I'm very disappointed in what they chose to go through for the sequel. And I kind of really wished this was totally, I kind of really wish they scrapped it and then redid the script from start. But the funny thing is, I can see this movie still making money. Like, I haven't been paying attention to movie news, so I don't know how well movies are doing, but I'm pretty sure just this being a kid's film with this many sort of film properties together, I'm pretty sure this movie's gonna make some money. If not, it's definitely on the merchandising side. And here's the thing, I love crossovers. Films just getting mashed up and actually seeing it on the big screen and all that, and crossovers or little unexpected things. We're in the age of the crossovers, especially after Ready Player One and the Lego Movie and the Batman Lego Movie and the Lego Movie 2, which are all done by Warner Brothers, by the way. And especially with what Marvel's been doing lately with their Avengers stuff and all that, we're gonna definitely be seeing much more of these type of films like Space Jam. And Space Jam: A New Legacy is the first one that I feel like really sort of missed the mark of what could have been, just from the wrong direction that they went with. Just a reminder, I don't think Space Jam: A New Legacy is a bad film. I didn't like the choices that it made. This is the first movie that had so many different properties in it, crossover wise, and I didn't really care, but it was cool to watch. It was a fever dream to watch, and that bugs the hell out of me because I love seeing stuff like this. Like, there is a montage in this film, a very pointless montage that's not well structured, especially given what the script is, of them going to different Warner Brother related movies, such as Mad Max Fury Road and The Matrix, and it's like, in Casablanca at one point, and I'm like, if I was young, I would be losing my shit at this movie. Like, if this movie came out 10 years ago, I would have probably lost my shit. But it didn't. It came out this year, and the fact that I was watching, I'm like, oh, that's cool. That looked cool. I love how older movies are making an appearance in this newer film. And you're seeing the Looney Tunes sort of interact in that world very briefly. But it's just done so haphazardly. It's so like, okay, here it is. Money shot, moving on. Money shot, moving on. Okay. What's that? We see Wile E. Coyote in Mad Max. Okay, we're done. We're gonna see, Granny in The Matrix. Okay, that's it. Okay, moving on. Like, it doesn't. I have figured out what is wrong with this little montage is that there's no conflict of trying to get the characters, and also the conflict of why the characters. Well, actually, in the movie, we know why the characters are put on those different worlds, because the AI was like, oh, I'm gonna bring them to all the other properties for some strange unknown reason. But it's just kind of funny, because it's like, if you think about it, it's like Yosemite Sam is in Casablanca playing the piano, and it's like, what's the reason why he wanted to stay there? Like, there's none of that. Like, I don't understand. And it's kind of like, it's so kind of stupid if you think about it. Like, if you have some sort of brain, it's stupid. That's what I felt. They show a little bit there, and then it's like they instantly have that character. There's no conflict per se. The only one that had conflict was the one with Lola Bunny. That one had just a little bit of conflict to get Lola Bunny back and on our basketball team. And it's like, It's like it just a lot of it was just thrown in there for the hell of it, and I really dislike that. Which is so weird me saying that, because like I know deep down somewhere inside I'm like, oh, this is so cool, but I kind of wanted more, or for it to make sense more. Like, for example, the Lego movie. In the Lego movie, this is an example of using different properties in a right way for the story and all that, and how they structured it, and the little gags, and it works so well in that film. And I have the strangest feeling that Warner Brothers got the wrong idea from that film. And some of the choices I dislike, I understand why they did it in that style. So, for example, having LeBron James turn into a toon for the Toontown portion of the film, I understand. It's a lot more easier having a 2D animation dealing with other 2D animations. After, seeing Space Jam, the original, it's kind of like, that was kind of just sort of the best, like, not the best part, but it's one of the parts that sort of grab you, is seeing a live action person interacting in Toontown. I keep calling it Toontown. I don't know if that's actually the actual name. But it's just, it was such a nice appeal of having a live action deal in an animated world. And that's also the appeal of the other previous films, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Looney Tunes Back in Action, is having animation, 2D animation in the 3D world. And it's just, it's very cool. And so by streamlining everything, making it easier, save on production money, I understand the choice. I just didn't like it. Though the animation was like quite well. Like, I mean, the visual effects in this movie is actually pretty good. Like, I could see Space Jam: A New Legacy actually getting a nomination for either Best Visual Effects and or Best Animation, but it also kind of depends on how the Academy views this film, because, I mean, The Adventures of Tintin wasn't nominated for Best Animated Feature because they used mocap, even though the entire film is animated on top of the mocap acting work. I mean, I'm still very salty about that. Anyways, don't know how much money they put into the film, but the visual effects, nothing felt unfinished, nothing felt bad per se. I'll get to that. But like, specifically the 2D portion of the film works really well. It looks really nice, very seamless, and it matches the Looney Tunes style. And really enjoyed some of the old classic nods they had to the older Looney Tunes stuff, like the barbershop scene and the when the ridiculous chase is happening, and it pauses, freeze frame, to say what the name of the characters are. And like I like those little nods. I enjoyed those references. And then what I meant by streamlining it, later on in the film, the algorithm decides to change the tunes from 2D to 3D. I was like, well, I kind of lost a bit of respect with the movie for doing that. But I totally understand, because not only do you have sort of the courtside game to deal with having original Goon Squad, the opposite team characters, being CGI sort of monster basketball players, having to deal with that CGI element, and having the tunes be in 2D would be crazy. And then on top of that, having the audience in the background, which is comprised of live action people and cartoon characters from various shows, and the fact that they made the decision to streamline it to the 3D computer generated images is very, very, very understandable, because I would not want to be the one that has to deal with the logistics of this movie. But it would be actually kind of an accomplishment if they had the guts to go through with having the Looney Tunes in 2D, having the Goon Squad in the 3D animation, or the CGI animation, and then having the background be a mix of 2D and CG, as well as live action. That would have actually made the movie, I felt, it either would have made the movie work even better, or as a technical level, or it might have backfired and not worked, because I mean, we see it in older movies all the time where they try to do something technical ahead of its time, and it's like, well, didn't age as well. So maybe what I'm saying is, if they went through with it, that the movie Space Jam: A New Legacy would not hold up in 10 or 20 years. So I totally understand why they streamlined it, but didn't like it. Didn't like that choice, okay? Once again, not a terrible film, not a bad film. I will say, though, there is one specific scene cameo that I actually made me really laugh out loud in the theater, because this was a joke that I kind of always, like, every now and then I would kind of make this joke. The fact that this movie actually went through and did that joke, literally, I kind of clapped in my head, because I was like, wow, they did it. They acknowledged that joke, okay? I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you know the specific cameo scene when it happens. The feeling of that cameo actually reminded me of the Will Ferrell Sherlock Holmes movie, where it had this one specific cameo near the end that I'm like, it kind of makes up for this really crappy film. And the funny thing is, it had a similar effect with this movie, except the film itself wasn't actually crappy. Interpret that as you will. So anyways, the big question I have with this episode is, what movies got you back into the theaters to watch? Or if you decide to stay home and play it safe, well, I don't blame you. What new movies did you check out on the streaming services? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. I want you to have a nice day or night or whatever time you watch this. Have a nice whenever. I know in the last episode I teased Marvel's WandaVision to review, but figured it might be better if I group all the Marvel shows that I needed to catch up on into one episode. So that episode is going to take a little bit longer to make. In the meanwhile, I can tease maybe a possible movie in the future. There's a specific third movie of a very critically acclaimed, Oscar-winning, considered one of the best 2 movies of all time. And the third movie I actually never seen. They just recently, in the last year or two, released a alternate cut of that third film. I have the very exclusive privilege of being able to watch the alternate edit of the movie before seeing the original theatrical cut of this third film. The first 2 are considered masterpieces, and I've already seen the first 2. I've been hearing the third one is not looked at as kindly, so in the future, I will be reviewing The Godfather Part 3.